And welcome back, everybody, to the Podcaster Nation. This is Rory Paquette. I'm your host. You guys all know that already. I am so grateful to be here. Folks, I just want to thank everybody. We've been doing 5 days a week publishing. You guys have been liking, you've been subscribing, you've been sharing, you've been doing everything I could ever ask anybody to do with a podcast, and then some. Some of you guys are even like chopping it up and sending it out, which is beautiful. I love it. Go for it. PR is good PR for everybody. This is the podcast, folks, that is about podcasters. It's for podcasters and it's done by podcasters. And my guest today is a podcaster. That's right. You figured it out. You cracked my code. This is the place where the rising tide raises all ships. Let's get ready to rumble. Here we go. We have a fantastic guest today, a host of the Unfinished Idea podcast. And I can't wait to hear where that name come from. Greer Jones. How you doing, Greer?
Hello. Yeah, I'm great. I'm enjoying my evening because I am in England.
I was just going to say, I love your accent because it's like sort of English with like an American twang. It's really cool.
Yeah. Yes, it definitely confuses people when I pop on their screen to do an interview and they anticipate it's going to be an American and then it's a very weird accent, which they then can't place because it's like you say, part British, part American.
Yeah. And then you say
So
something like popping on, which we don't say in America. So
yeah.
it's awesome.
Yes.
All
Yeah.
right. Well, Greer, give us, tell the audience a little bit about you. Okay. You can, start, I don't know, when you were one, two, three, something like that. It's totally fine. No big deal. Just let them know kind of who you are, and what you're about.
Yeah, so I'm Greer. A very unusual name to start with. That's, I could go all the way back to my great grandmother's. That's her name. My
Oh,
whole family's from Norway. They've all moved to America. But I won't go that far. That we could be here a while. But yeah, I grew up in the US. I lived in the US. I knew from a very early age I probably wouldn't be an adult in the US, if that makes sense. It sounds strange, it sounds weird, but I don't know. I just kind of knew. So when I was in uni or college, I had an opportunity to do a gap year and came to England because I thought I don't need to learn another language. They speak English. How wrong I was, we'll just say. They speak English. We speak American. I learned that in about a week.
oh, no kidding.
I told a little boy to pull up his pants. A little boy, as in like a 3-year-old, 4-year-old, and he broke down in tears. And I was like, "Oh, okay, yeah, sorry," and realized that pants is underwear. So he was very embarrassed that he thought I was like telling him to, pull up his underwear. So yeah,
Wow.
week one. So
Well, wait,
that was
what do they call pants?
trousers.
Trousers.
Yeah, or
Okay.
jeans. They're very specific. Like they'll be so trousers, or the other thing is sweatpants. Obviously not a thing in England. They call them tracky bottoms. I still can't say that. I'm always like, what are they called? Like, I always get very confused. It's still, I've been here for 15 years and yeah, still don't know the language. So
All righty.
it's
Tracky bottoms. There you go.
tracky bottoms, yeah. And tennis shoes are called trainers. I got told off today. I have two sons, one's 6 and one's 3. And my 3-year-old was like, I don't have tennis shoes, mummy. I have trainers. I was like, sorry. Oh, okay. Yep. It's like, this is fun. Yeah. Sorry. I also have 2 dogs, which you might be here barking because my husband, who's a nurse, I'm just telling you all the facts,
Go for it. We got it.
has just come home. So
Cool.
they are my protectors. They do not allow like we have 2 dogs. One of them we had when both my kids were born, and we were actually really worried if he was going to let my son like be on me, if that makes sense,
Really?
because he's so protective that yeah, not to worry, they love each other, they're best friends. He was totally fine. It was just this weird like, how's he going to react? Like, didn't know. We didn't
Funny.
know. It's like having another child, really. We were like, how's the first one going to react?
What kind of
But
dogs?
yeah, so I've been in England for 15 years. It's definitely home.
Oh,
I have when I go back to visit my family, I have reverse what they call it reverse culture shock. I just call it culture shock because I find Walmart overwhelming. Walmart
really?
and Target, I go and I'm just like, oh wow, like just all the choices, how big it is, the fact that I can get everything and anything. Um,
Do
my
you not
husband
have a Walmart
still,
over there?
we don't have Walmart. No,
Wow, no kidding.
we have like this, the closest thing is Asda, but it's not as big. It's nothing is as big as things in America. Like houses, we live in a very nice, quote unquote, big 4-bedroom house, which is probably the half the size of a house in America. Like it's just land, like there's just not as much land. We're an island. We're a tiny island. So yeah, things are just a lot smaller. So I remember my dad, he's my parents come usually for like a month or so at a time. Um, and he went to Sainsbury's with me and he goes, "You don't really have much choice for things, do you?" And I was like, "Oh, what do you mean?" He goes, "Well, you have those baked beans or those baked beans. That's it. Like it's like two choices." And I was like, "Oh, yeah, I guess not." Like, and he's like, Your tea, you have, three choices of tea." And I was like, "Yeah, but everyone just kind of buys the same tea. Like it's just." I was like, yeah, I guess we just don't have as many choices. So, whereas he's like, yeah, in America, we'd have, like a whole aisle of tea or a whole, it's just that kind of, which for Brits, they love their tea. You would have thought the one thing they would have a
I would
million
have
choices
thought.
on would be
Absolutely, I would have thought.
tea. But they just have, yeah, they just don't have as many choices, which I hadn't really realized. But that's partly why when I go to Walmart, I get really overwhelmed because I'm like, oh, I don't know what I want, like, like I don't need. The other thing he pointed out was like we have four types of kitchen roll or paper towels. Um, like that's it. Like there's just four kind of types. Like that's kind of that's our choice is four. And he's like, there's a whole aisle at Walmart. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's so true. Like this is only half an aisle. Like it's not even, it's just, yeah, it's just differences. That's England for you.
That's funny.
Um,
What's it like raising your kids over there in that kind of culture as opposed to
yeah.
where you were raised and what your parents were used to?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know if I've ever been asked that. I I think because so I went to university, college, and then as soon as I graduated, which I did college in 3 years, which obviously normally takes four. Um, I just going. I just side. This is a total side note. Going. I know this sounds crazy, but doing classes in the summer was the best. Loved it. I literally did 3 summers and graduated a year early. So
Wow.
loved it. Also loved college. If I could ever go back to one time in my life, it'd be college. So anyways, side note. But yeah, I graduated literally 3 weeks after I graduated, moved to England and knew I wasn't coming back. I didn't tell that to my parents at the time. I just said I was going for a year and then would get a real job, quote unquote. Uh, yeah, that was the deal.
All right.
I did a gap year and then finished, I did online classes while I was doing my gap year and then came back, did a year at university and then said, okay, I'll go back for a year and then I'll come back and get a real job, which I got my degree in education. So I think they assumed I would, become a teacher. And then I've just never come back. So they do know that I lied to them. This won't be a first telling. They do know that.
All
But
right. We're
yeah,
not breaking
so
any
because
news
of
here today.
that,
Good.
yeah,
Yeah.
not spilling the tea. But because of that, I don't really know what it. I remember telling this to a friend a few years ago, like I don't actually know what it's like to be an adult in America because I wasn't really a proper adult in America, if that
Hmm.
makes sense. So I don't know if I don't really know what it would be like to raise my kids there. Like thinking about my childhood was, it's very different. The school system is massively different. And I've just spent the day at my child's school because I'm head of the PTA. Um, Another side note, don't go to the school and say, why don't you have a PTA? And then they go, I don't know, you start one and you go, oh, okay, how hard can it be? And then a year later, here we are, um,
Be
doing
careful of what you wish
doing
for.
different activities. So yeah, be careful what you ask for. Um, but yeah, I think it's different in the sense of there's not as much. So I did grow up in a small town. I think there's different in that as well compared to, being in a city. But there's not as much community feel. I think about my town having a mascot and everyone would go to a football game on a Friday night. Even if you didn't have kids playing, you would still go because that's what you did in a small town. Whereas that's one, they don't have American football here, so that's weird. But also like they don't have school sports, like they don't have high school sports or anything like that. So it's all club related, which then is usually on a Sunday. So people don't really go to that. There's that kind of, does that make sense? That kind of community of like, yeah.
Yeah.
They technically don't have high school, so that was the one thing I think I have. It sounds really strange to say, but one thing I've had to like kind of grieve is not actually have my kids go to a high school graduation or be part of a high school graduation, because they don't do it. They just have secondary school and then you're done. Like it's just kind of last day of school is just you're done. There's no kind of big thing. So I have said to my husband, we will have a graduation for my kids because they're not going to miss out on that. They have prom. I'm like, they have prom. They have homecoming. Like, why? They have homecoming and don't even have American football. Like, do they even know what that is? So
Interesting.
yeah. But
Interesting.
yeah, so I think there are differences. It's just I don't totally know what it would be like, kind of raising kids now because yeah. I mean, I left America when I was 21, which is very young now that now
You
that
were
I look
still
back on my life.
basically a
I'm like,
kid. Yeah. You
yeah,
were
I think
basically a
back,
kid when you left.
yeah. Like I think when I left, I thought, oh, I was such an adult. I'm, moving to another country. I don't know why my parents are worried about this. Like, but now I look back and I think, yeah, I didn't really know loads. Like, I was probably, shielded in a good way, like to not kind of
Good.
realize all the things that could have gone wrong in me moving to another country. But
For sure.
yeah, it worked out. A
Wow.
few years later, I met my husband. We are about to celebrate actually in 2 weeks. Yeah, 14 days, 2 weeks. Our 10-year anniversary,
Well,
our wedding
congratulations.
anniversary.
That's
So
great.
thank you. Yeah. So I have to keep remembering. I'm that person, that couple who might forget. So I've recently been diagnosed with ADHD, and I blame my ADHD brain on that. So that's why I keep telling people I'm like, oh yeah, like for the last month now, I've been like, oh yeah, we're almost 10 months, like, or 10 years. And my friend's like, I know you've told me that like 3 times. And I'm like, I'm just telling you so you remember.
That's yeah, reminding yourself as you go
Yeah.
along, right? So you
I'm
don't
like,
forget.
yeah,
10 years is quite the accomplishment, especially in today's world. So congratulations. And I mean that. That's
thank
awesome.
you. Yeah. It's been a journey, but we're here.
Yeah.
We're we're still together, so and we're gonna celebrate. I'm
It's
not
all that
quite sure how,
matters.
but we're gonna celebrate.
And how many kids do you have?
We have two. I have two boys.
Okay.
So yeah, 6 and 3, which so in England they start school at 4. So next year my son I'll have two kids in school, which is that's a whole new thing. I didn't ever think about having my child start school at 4 because in the US it's 5 or 6
Right.
and
Yeah.
yeah, so it's a big that was a big adjustment going like, oh right, yeah, okay, like he'll be starting school soon.
So you're having some early empty nest syndrome, sounds like.
Yes,
A
yeah.
little early empty nest.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, I enjoy it. Fridays, I work part-time for a charity and as well as podcasting and all these other things.
Right.
But Fridays I kind of are very strict at not doing emails. That's probably the best thing is I try not to do emails on a Friday. Because they're both my youngest is in preschool as well because the US or the UK have a lot of funding for children. So like you get to go to preschool for free, which is cool. Um,
Huh, okay.
yeah. Yeah, I mean I do pay a lot of tax. Like it's not really free, but I pay like 20, I think it's 25% tax. So I like to think it is free. I like to think it's free, but really it's just I'm just paying it to someone else.
Right.
So, but yeah, so Fridays I have no kids for from 9 to 3, and it's the best. Like I recommend it for everyone. Uh, so,
Nice.
if you can just put your kids somewhere for a few hours, like highly recommend. But yeah, I do puzzles. That's the other thing. I'm also realize I saying to my best friend, I was like, "Can you move closer?" She lives 4 miles away. So like I don't, she's not that far. But I was like, "Could you move closer?" Because on Fridays I do puzzles and I feel like that's sad. Like I feel like I need more friends. She's like, "Yeah, but most people work on Fridays, Greer." Like that's what she's doing. She's like, "I
True.
can't come over because I'm working." Like so
Nice. Now, is 4 miles a long way in England? Because over here, you could
um
ride your bike that far. So,
yeah, it's not that far. I mean, it's like yeah. If I said like norm, no, it's not that far. It's just I I just, I want it one closer. We always have said we've been friends for I don't know now. I'm trying to think almost 10 years we've been friends. Um and we've always said that like when our husbands die, so like we'll be those people who live in the same house, like we'll just live together once our husbands die. And she's like gone on holiday, like she's gone on holiday with us. Like yeah, it's she's not married yet. She's getting married shortly, but it's not like yeah, we just were like we. I don't want to sound really weird. This might sound really creepy. But we joke, keyword joke. We don't have a weird relationship, but like she's like a sister wife because she just is part of our life. Like she has literally lived with us before as well. So it's like she's just
wow.
part of our life and she's not going anywhere. And so yeah, we just kind of and when she seriously started dating her now fiance, like I was like, so how do you feel about this? Like, you do know, like, you potentially could move in with us. Like, that's just how, like, and he's like, oh, okay. Like, I thought that was a joke. I was like, no, that's just our life. Like, we could, you know, I was like, how do you feel about buying the house next door to us? Like, that was the other thing. I was like, would that be, is that okay? And he's like, sure. Yeah, I guess. Like, and I'm like, okay, just
This
making sure you know how close this, this bond is.
this poor guy. Okay, so
So, yeah, I'm sure
I
you have
mean,
lots of questions now that I've opened that can of worms.
you never know where a Podcaster Nation podcast is going to go.
Yeah,
You just have no idea.
yeah.
So,
It,
uh,
it's okay if you just at the end of this conversation just go, "Wow, she needs help." Let me like that's okay. It's okay. That's
you're still no, you're still in the mild category.
okay.
So
Okay, cool.
you're just fine. I mean, you haven't heard all of our stuff yet that we've done on Podcaster Nation, but there's stuff that I haven't even released yet that I'm kind of going, I do need to release this. I'm pretty sure. Maybe I should check
Yeah,
it out a little more. No, the sister wife thing wasn't nearly as jarring as you just sitting there planning your husband's demise. Like after you'll be married
yeah.
10 years, you're already checking the guy out.
It's okay. Well, there's two things. We were married like 2 years, and so part of the whole buying a house here in England is you have to have life insurance and home insurance. That's a requirement for a mortgage. That's a requirement.
Hmm.
So we were looking at life insurance, and he was like, "You do know if you died, I could get like 5 million." And I was like, "Sorry, sorry, what?" Like, and he's like, "Yeah, I'm just saying, like, if you died, and it wasn't like a murder. Like, if I didn't murder you, like, I could get 5 million for your death." Like, and I was like, "Is that what I'm worth to you?" He's like five, and he's like, "Yeah, pretty much." Like, he's like, "I mean, I love you. I'd love to have you around a bit longer." But I was like, "A bit longer?" Like, I was like, "Oh my gosh." I was like, "Wow, okay." So,
So he
yeah, so if I
started it.
do die
I mean,
suddenly,
he started it. So yeah,
yeah,
he gets everything
exactly.
that's coming to him
Like,
now after that joke. So
yeah. Like, I mean, literally, I was like, from that conversation, texting my best friend, going, if I do die suddenly, Chris is the one.
you know
Like,
what happened.
yeah, like just, you know, um, he he does say he worries though, because I like to listen to a lot of true crime. Um, love true crime podcasts, love true crime documentaries, and I'm that person who's like, don't like I like to figure it out. It's weird. So he's the one he's like, I'm like, yeah, you should be worried. Like I've heard enough true crime where I'm like, yeah, that person, that's where they messed up. Like that's how they got caught was, So yeah,
This
yeah,
podcast is going to be used by like Scotland Yard or something,
yeah,
in some, big crime solving thing. This is going to be like evidence
yeah.
of
Yeah, okay.
pre-planning.
So new topic. No,
Okay,
it's good. Yeah.
so why don't we talk about your podcast a little bit and just kind of
Yeah.
see, yeah. So
Natural transition.
there we go.
Um,
From true crime
yeah.
podcast to this podcast to your podcast.
Yeah.
The you've got two kids now. Are one of your kids neurodivergent? Because that's what your podcast is about.
Yeah. Yeah. So my oldest is autistic ADHD.
Okay.
And we knew from a very early age, to be honest. So he was born 2019, a year. He had his first birthday, and literally 3 weeks later, the world shut down because of COVID. And in the UK, the world shut down. Like everything was closed.
Yeah.
Yeah, and my husband being a nurse, so he was away a lot. He would work crazy hours. So it was just him and not like my son and I for a long time. That sounds really weird, but you know what I mean. And so when the world kind of started opening up again, we just kind of noticed he wasn't responding to things the same and just kind of processing things. And his speech was really delayed. This is still shocks me every time I say this. But we went to the GP, the doctor, and I just said, like, his speech is really delayed. He is trying to communicate, but not not really making words. Could we get referred to a speech therapist? And the first thing the GP said to me was, well, I think it's because of your accent. And I was like, literally said, nope, try again. Like I was like, nope, try again. Um,
Blamed
and
you
he was
for it.
like,
Wow.
yeah, he was like, well, you do, if it is just kind of you and him doing a lot of talking, like he could be confused by the accent. I was like, but I'm still speaking English. Like it's not like I'm speaking a completely different language to him. So I was like,
Right.
nope, not that's not good enough. Like you, so we did get the referral, and he has had speech and language therapy, which has been good. But yeah, so I would have said around two was kind of when I realized, oh, he's different. Like I didn't know exactly what that was. I didn't know what was kind of going on, but I just kind of knew he was different and he just did things differently. And then yeah, he started school when he was 4. And that was when we really saw just kind of different delays, particularly his speech and how he was reacting to things. Like he would get really angry really quickly or really happy. Like he'd go from being really angry to really happy in literally 2 seconds. And you're just like, I always often said I would have whiplash of like, oh right, okay, we're over that emotion, we're on to another
Right.
one. Um, and yeah, the school, that was a really tricky situation we had to go through. And it was through kind of that situation I realized a lot of my friends around me weren't experiencing that. And um, I just felt really lonely. I felt really overwhelmed, really lonely. I was going in weekly for meetings with the school. Every day, I would have the teacher would come and talk to me of like, oh, he's done this, or he hit a child, he spit a child, he smacked a teacher. Like it was very just, he threw a pencil. He decided to get naked one day. That was like, I was like, okay, fair enough. Like clothes, he has a lot of sensory kind of differences. And so clothes is one thing that we've had to really work through and see what he does and doesn't like. And they wear uniform here in the UK. Every school wears a uniform. All different. Every school has a different uniform, but we all wear a uniform. So yeah, just things like that. And I just kind of started sharing a little bit of my life on Instagram and just started seeing people kind of come out of the woodworks really of like, oh yeah, my son's autistic or my daughter is ADHD or whatever, or I have ADHD or whatever. And so it's from kind of having those conversations with people that I then started a podcast, which it was, I have to laugh because a friend said to me, hey, you should start a podcast. Like, this is really helpful. Like, you're so willing to share what your everyday looks like so people can kind of just see and then, all these things. So that happened at like 10 in the morning. By the time I went to bed, I had a website, I had the socials, I had reached out to a couple of people of like, hey, I'm starting a podcast. Like, what do I need? Basically. Um, and then I told my husband. So I'd had all this stuff done, and I was like, oh, by the way, I'm starting a podcast. Which at the time I hadn't realized I had ADHD. I was kind of going through that process, but I was still slightly in denial. I look back now and I think to myself, that's probably the most ADHD thing I've ever done. It's like, because
Really?
that's just ADHD people I just hyperfixated on this, and I made a very quick decision and was like, I'm running with this. Um, Again, Michael Scott, I love The Office. I think I would hate if Michael Scott was real. I think I'd hate him in real life, but he's not real, so I love him. And he's like the quote I always think of is like, "I've had this great idea since lunch," like, and I'm totally misquoting it, but that idea that like he's like had this idea and had it since
Right.
lunch.
Since
Yeah,
lunch.
that's my life. Like that is, I've had this great idea since lunch, and I'm now investing everything into it. So yeah, so from that. From that one friend saying you should do this, I started a podcast where we have everyday conversations about either being neurodivergent or raising a neurodivergent child. And I have parents on, I have professionals and experts on, kind of just sharing different experiences. And it's been like an amazing journey. Every conversation I leave with something. I always kind of say, if the only person who listens is my husband, because I force him to, I would still do this because I learn something from every conversation about myself, about you know, my son, about just the world, the neurodiverse world,
Yeah.
because it's so big. I mean, the fact that it's roughly 20% of the world are neurodivergent. Like that's to me is just a big number. That's a big number.
Yeah, I
Like,
didn't realize it was that big. No kidding.
that's a big number. And so the fact that like, yeah, that's not really being talked about. Like it's still kind of there's still a lot of stigmas and things. I just think um, yeah, it's been it's a big sometimes feel like it's a big job, but I also think it's a fun job that I get to do this. So I always say my podcast is a place for people to learn and grow, but also feel seen and heard, because I want people to know that they're not alone. That's the biggest thing for me because I felt so alone for so long. For probably 6 months, I just felt totally isolated. And partly why I went to the school and said, let's start a PTA because I was like, I want to meet other moms who are raising kids like mine. And so we've now
Right.
started coffee mornings, and then yeah, doing kind of an online social media is great. I mean, I've connected with so many people in so many different ways. People ask me all the time, like, how do I get guests? I'm like, I slide into their DMs. Like the amount of DMs I've slid into because I'm like, hey, I think you're cool and I have a podcast. Do you want to like be
I
friends
think
and
you're
come on my
cool.
podcast? Yeah. But oh yeah, I literally one time oh, it's so embarrassing. She's the best. I always say I joke she's my new BFF. Her name's Jackie. She has ADHD, and I literally slid into her DMs and was like, I really love the content you produce. I think we would be best friends in real life if we could, but you live in America, I live in the UK. But would you want to come on my podcast? Which I have no idea why I would ever say that. Like usually I have like a little template of like copy and paste. But for some reason I just felt like I needed to say that. And she comes back and she's like, yes, I would love to. I've actually just listened to your podcast, because you requested, and I think we would be best friends. And oh my gosh, like, yes, and oh, and I'm like, oh my gosh, Greer, like that was so unprofessional, but equally it was like, now I have a new best friend. Um,
Now, is Jackie
so
moving into the house too when you kill your
yeah, I
husband?
think so. Yeah, she has two kids and a husband as well, so it might get a little cramped, but yeah.
I was just checking. I mean, if she's your
Yeah, I
BFF,
mean
then
that's a requirement. Let's just be honest. Like to be my best friend, you just have to be willing to move into my house. You don't have to, but You have to be willing,
I got it. I'm starting to crack the code. I
Yeah.
understand.
Yeah. I have a quiz basically. To be my friend, you have to take a quiz. And if you don't answer correctly, then I'm like, well, you're now dead to me.
So is that how you
So
find all your guests? By sliding up in the DMs?
but most of them, yeah.
Really?
Well, because the other thing is so many people don't have their email. I mean, to be fair, I don't really have my email address plastered everywhere, but it's really hard to find people's email address. Like there's certain people I'm like they don't have, maybe they don't have a website or I don't know, it's just like they don't have their I'm like, come on guys, like can you make it easy for me, please? Like
Right.
so I'm a little more professional than, with BFF Jackie. And I say like who I am, share a little bit about the podcast and say, oh, can I get your email? So then we can like talk more, which usually then they do. So it's not all DM. I don't want to sound like I'm only in their DMs, but
Got it. Gotcha.
whatever works, right?
And
Like,
then whatever gets them on the show, frankly. So
yeah, exactly. Exactly.
awesome. All right. So that's how you find guests. So we covered that part.
Yeah.
Now you got all motivated and said, I'm going to go start a podcast right now. What kind of gear did you pick up? How'd you get started? Or did you just grab your phone and say, to heck with it, I'm just going to do it the easy way?
Yeah, no, so one thing as well, I should say, because I hyper fixated, I watched so many YouTube videos,
Oh,
which
wow.
was a good and bad thing. Don't, don't do that, I would just say. Um, so I found out like all the tech. Do, I have a microphone, which you can't see because it's hidden. It's down here.
Hmm.
I could wear headphones. Sensory thing is I can't wear headphones. It's a weird thing. Um, I don't like things like this, and my Apple things for some reason don't work very well. Like it's a weird thing. I know other people who wear the Apple AirPods, but I don't know. I have said to my husband as well, like I should get new tech, like aka new headphones. So if he listens to this, which he will, I make him listen to so many things. I bless him. It's a good like the fact that he's been married to me for the last year is probably a testament of how much he loves me because I've made him listen to so many things. But yeah, I'm like, I'm sure, we can get this like it's now so the unfinished idea is quote unquote now a business. It's now classed as a business because of tax stuff. It's
Right.
don't ask me. I did That's just what our accountant said, who is my brother.
It's a good way to do it.
So yeah,
Yeah.
there's I don't know. Basically my brother is a tax man and I just give him all my receipts every year and he then says, "Sure, I'll do this for you." And then he always tells me he's gonna charge me and never does. So it works out great.
There you go.
It's great. So, but yeah, I'm sure there's some way I can, on the business get new headphones that are Apple, AirPod, but we haven't done that yet. I'm sure.
They're a write-off.
When my
I'm
husband
sure.
listens to this, I'll be like, "Come on."
I'm sure they're a
Um,
write-off. I'm not a tax guy, but I'm sure they're a write-off in some
yeah,
capacity. I mean, yeah,
surely,
you gotta have them.
surely.
So that's
Come
great.
on. Yeah, thank you. I like your thinking.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I just YouTubed everything and Googled everything and just was like, what is the best mic? So I have like a microphone that I've kind of set up. I use Riverside. That's how I do my recordings just
Sure.
because I will say I was very convinced I was going to edit my own podcast. Went to start to edit one with a friend who was willing to just kind of be. I said to her, "This may never air. Like, are you okay with that?" And she's like, "Oh yeah, totally. Like, whatever." And somehow I erased the audio. The video is still there, and I could hear at one point, but
Oh,
somehow I
no
erased
way.
the audio. So I will say I do hire someone to edit my podcasts because I just was like, I can't do that. Like, yeah, technology is not my friend, and so it doesn't live in my house. We'll just we'll
I
just say.
understand. I
Um,
understand.
so yeah, so I do hire someone for that, which he I always say he's magical because he can make. I mean, his job literally is to edit podcasts, so it's probably a good thing he can make any podcast sound better. But he's made it so where I had a cold and I was like jokingly, I said to him, like, could you make me not sound like I have a cold? And he did. I was like, well,
Oh,
this is weird.
wow. So he's good
Like,
at his job.
he's good. Yeah, he's
Okay.
good.
You don't find
So,
that very often, got to be honest with you. I mean, you can find
yeah,
editors, but good ones, that's hard to find.
yeah. I mean, he edits a lot of podcasts. I mean, that is his like full-time job. So I'm like, yeah, it's good. So, but he's good. Yeah, he's great. So, I'm not going to tell you his name because I don't want him to get too crowded and then he dropped my podcast. So I tell people I don't. I'm like, no, you can't have his name. Just kidding. I would share it if
It's
you
okay.
wanted it. But
I thought
his
maybe you
name's
wanted to give him
Brad.
a shout out or something,
Yeah, I
but
should
I
probably
do
give him a shout
understand you don't
out
want to
because
like
he,
lose your guys.
yeah, his name is Brad. Um, what I don't actually know what company he works for. I
Right,
think it's called the
okay.
Good Podcasting Company. I think that's what it's called.
That's a good name for a
Yeah.
editing place.
Um, he lives in Texas. I don't know if people may
All
not want
right,
people to
so
know that,
shout
but
out to Brad in Texas. Good
yeah,
job. You know who you are. And
yeah,
look, Greer just doesn't want everybody else to know who you are right now, okay? Because she loves you that much and needs you. So just take it
yeah,
for what it's worth, brother. Okay? Move on. Move on. No, cry in the corner, but move on.
yeah.
All right. I think we're good with Brad.
Perfect. Thanks. Thank you. He'll appreciate that. But yeah, so I, yeah, that's what I do basically. I don't know. I kind of
That's
lost my
great.
train of thought on that. So,
It's okay. You answered the question. That's all I needed. So you're perfect.
okay.
The as you got going with your podcast and stuff, the podcast itself, is it educational? Is it stories about, people who deal with this stuff? Is it motivational? I mean, what's the purpose behind the podcast and the way that you do it?
Yeah. I would say all of the above, which I know is not great. But no, it just depends. So I have parents on there who are just sharing their story. So that idea that people can just hear, oh yeah, I went through that, that situation. I have a son or a daughter who, is nonverbal or, just kind of, I have parents on there who just share their stories. And then I do have experts on there as well, because I think I want to learn as well. I think not that parents can't teach you anything, that sounds bad, but so I have had kind of that education side as well, I guess, from experts who've, written books or are just kind of experts in their field. It sounds
Okay.
kind of strange, but yeah, I've had like yeah, I guess they are doctors. Like I was like medical professionals. Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah.
On there. So yeah, so it's kind of I think for me, I wanted it to be a mixture of learning of, how can we have, I've had someone on, well, it's not aired yet, but it's someone about music therapy. I was like, and we just talked about how music can help those who are neurodivergent, with their brains being calm or help get out emotions or, different things. So it's like kind of that side is educational, but then she shares her story of being, having ADHD and how she found music to help her and soothe her and that idea that like yeah, I mean, fun fact, neurodivergent people, I don't want to say everyone, this is a bit of a sweeping statement, but most neurodivergent people have perfect pitch, which I think is amazing.
Huh.
Yeah, so it's very,
Never heard that before. Okay.
very interesting. Yeah. I don't want to say it's not 100%, but it's majority, I would say, like majority of people, which is a sign that's like a study that's been done.
Wow.
So yeah. Yeah, and autistic people in particular have, because of how their brain is wired, they like music can like trigger something. This is gonna totally, I'm probably gonna totally get this wrong, but can trigger something in their brain to basically mean that they can react more peacefully, if that makes sense. So for example, we play a song when we're moving from kind of end of the day to bedtime routine. We play a song and it just helps my son. It just triggers something in his brain to know, oh, this is now, it's okay to transition. Because a lot of autistic, particularly children, can't always transition. They don't like that change of going from one activity to another.
Hmm.
And so they will fight it. And so we were finding nighttime routine was really hard. So we've been putting this song on for probably about 6 months now. And his brain just knows like, oh, that song, to the point where it came on my Spotify shuffle like in the middle of the day a couple weeks ago, and he was like, "Oh, is it bedtime?" And it's like the middle of the day. I was like, "Oh no, sorry, wrong song, wrong song." Like change the song, change the song. But yeah, so I don't know. It's just amazing things like that. I had no idea, but then had this conversation with music therapist, and we now
Neat.
have a totally new routine. So
Very cool.
yeah.
I love that you're, so excited about everything you're learning in your own podcast too. That's so cool.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Every conversation, I learn something and I'm like, right, okay. Like, there's literally been times in the conversation where I'm like, sorry, I'm gonna just stop for a second. I need to write this down before I forget. And they're like, oh, yeah, cool. But
That's great. I mean, that's
yeah,
enough reason to do a podcast right there, frankly, so I'm
exactly.
glad to
Yeah.
hear that. That's great.
Yeah.
Now, how do you promote your podcast? What do you do to actually promote it? What do you dislike, doing that type of thing?
Um, so I do a lot of stuff on social media, which as a consumer of social media, I thought I knew what I was doing. As a creator of social media, that's a whole new world. But
Very
yeah, I
different.
promote on
Yeah,
social media. I have like a newsletter from that, as well. So I send out a bi-weekly, every other week newsletter that promotes stuff. I do collaborations. I love getting to have be on like I love collaborating. So having being on other people's podcasts or having, doing kind of a written, I guess ad. It doesn't seem right, but like a written promotion where we kind of swap. So I've just done one for a couple weeks where I talked about someone else's podcast and she talked about mine. So,
very
which was
cool.
really fun. I just think, yeah, it was really interesting because there are lots of podcasts out there for kind of in that neurodivergent space, and they all have a different audience and different kind of target. And I was like, everyone's different. Like, so if I can point someone to a podcast that they're going to really connect with, why wouldn't I want to? Like
Right.
it's we're all producing great stuff. Like, so I think there's a room for everyone. So
I love
yeah,
that
those are kind of the
whole
two main
attitude.
ways.
Yeah, I really
Yeah.
do. I'm
I
always
love that.
saying that we're not competing against each other. You know what I mean? That we're
Yeah.
all out here doing it. And someone who like really likes to listen to me may not want to listen to you. Someone who really loves listening to you may not jive with me when they hear me, so it's people are going to pick out who they connect with, and we're not competing with each other. There's more than enough room for everybody. So
Yeah.
I love that attitude that you have about, working together and rising tide raises all ships type of thing. It's so cool.
Yeah, I just and I even think about like for myself as a listener, like I'll listen to a podcast for a season just because that's what I have capacity for or whatever reason, and so I just think you never know, like you never know. And you never know, I hear a lot of times I'll hear of a recommendation on another podcast and go, "Oh, go check it out," and listen to an episode, go, "Oh, that was a good one," or, "Oh, actually I want to keep going." So I think, yeah,
Right.
you never know. But
Very
I love
cool.
it, yeah. And just the kind of community, not just of, not just the people I've had on the show, kind of the parents and the experts, but also just like the community of podcasters I've met through this, has been amazing. Like there's been so many people I've met that I would never have thought I would ever meet, like, or, and just that kind of, again, that connection of, I was on someone else's podcast and then a few weeks later got an email because they're like, oh, hey, this landed in my email box and I thought of you, and it then led into now I have an opportunity speaking at an event. Like it's just that kind of stuff as well. I just like I think is amazing.
Yeah.
And just yeah, it's really cool. I love it.
That's
Um,
that's awesome. Now, have you had a chance to monetize at all and to get into the monetization world with your podcast? I know you're young at 30 episodes, but 30 episodes is also pretty good. I mean, you've already broken the first hurdle of 20. So, where are you with that?
yeah. Yeah, so I like to say I've monetized my podcast by a cup of coffee. So I have B-roll ads um that kind of are played throughout. I do sit on a podcast network that's based in the US. Um, and so they've gotten some advertising. So so they have specific advertising for shows, and then they have what's called a network advertising.
Sure.
So it's when it goes on the whole network. So I've had a few kind of sponsored things that way, which yeah, I always say it's like I don't go in for the money. I mean, I think I've made $40. I don't know. No, I don't know. I don't know how much I've made. A
Okay.
cup of coffee. That's what I've made. That's let's be honest. But it's I always kind of say like I don't go in for the money, but it would be nice to have something where I can make it sustainable. Like, because I do have someone else edit my podcast, so kind of making it break even is basically what I've said my goal is just to break even.
Sure.
So I know it takes time. I know it takes, it's such a from a advertising point of view, you need a lot. And so I'm like, okay, we'll just go and we'll just keep going and
That's
we'll see what happens.
the common perception, yeah, is that you need to have like 10,000 downloads, in order to get, larger money. But I understand where you're at. I really do. You and
Yeah.
everybody else at your spot, and you're already into it. Do you mind telling me a little bit about the platform that you're on? I mean, you want to give them a shout out or anything, or you can just keep it to yourself if you want.
Yeah, so as in the network
Yeah,
or
right, the network.
yeah. So yeah, I'm on what's called the That Sounds Fun network. They're based out of Nashville, Tennessee.
Oh, wow.
Um, they have a whole range of shows. I don't even know how many shows they have, I'll be honest with you, but they have a whole range. And they're growing, which is really exciting. But they have kind of, I don't know if levels is the right, it's not levels. It makes it sound like it's a pyramid scheme. But like, uh, you can interact with them, I guess, if that makes sense. So, because I know nothing about podcasting. I mean, I started, like I said, when I was like, I'm going to start a podcast. I got the handle and had 2 followers when I launched. Well, not quite when I launched my first episode, but the idea that I didn't have a massive following. So I've been going through a program of learning how to podcast, learning how to host, they have that kind of level, if that makes sense. And then they have kind of a level of like, oh, I just want you to do advertising for me. So, I don't need you to promote my podcast or I don't need you to do, anything like that.
I
So
see.
kind of, yeah, that's the level, I guess, if that makes sense. So you can kind of
Cool.
decide. But yeah, they're great. Highly recommend them. They're really fun, which
Awesome.
in the name, that sounds fun. So,
Yeah, sure does. Do you have to pay to
um,
be on that network?
so they take part of your advertising, is they take that, not all of it, but they take a portion of
A
it,
piece of
if
the
that makes sense.
advertising money. I see. I got
Yeah.
you. So, but you don't have
So,
to pay to be on it though. You're on a profit share thing.
yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. I've heard of that model. I mean, that's legit. So, I mean, I
Yeah.
understand completely. Well, that's
Yeah.
awesome. I mean, that's cool too. All right. Well, I always ask one, corny question. So you may have answered some of this already, but since you farm out your editing, but I always ask everybody this one question: when it comes to your podcasting, what is it about doing your podcast that you love the most, and what is it about doing your podcast that you just really hate the most?
So I love what I do with podcasting is just that community of people I've met, either through guests on my podcast or other podcasters, and just love how I, to be honest, I know I'm sure there's some out there, but I've not met them, and I hope I don't have to meet them. But like, I've not met someone who's not championed other people, if that makes sense. Like everyone, I've just met people who are they're like, yeah, we're all in this together. We're all celebrating everyone's wins, and not to say, we wouldn't all love to have 1 million downloads or something, but we all celebrate it because we're like, we know how hard that is.
Right.
So I think that's one of the things I love about podcasting is just getting to meet this community of podcasters and guests and yeah, just kind of all of so many people. I mean, I literally was putting together a list of the different people I've met. Um, and it's just amazing. I was like, wow, I don't think I would have ever met any of these people if I wasn't podcasting. So,
Right.
that's great. I will say the things I don't like. is like the admin of podcasting. So, which maybe I was just I was blind to it because clearly podcasting started on, you know, a whim. But just there's a lot of admin that you don't really realize in podcasting. The kind of back and forth with guests, which sounds mean to say, but it's just, it's just time consuming. It just takes, trying to get a date and particularly when you're talking to neurodivergent people, they don't like to set things. Like, so I remember going back and forth with someone. They're like, "Oh, I don't mind. This date works really well." And I'm like, "Okay, great. Let's go with that date. Can you do either of these times?" "Oh, I don't mind which time you pick." And I'm like, "Oh my gosh." Like, so I have found ways to like make it a little easier with different kind of semi-automation type things. But it was like, but it's still just that. So there's still some back and forth to it that I just hadn't realized goes into podcasting. And just the, writing the show notes, all of that kind of admin-y stuff that is just magical. You just think, oh, there it is, when you're listening to a podcast. So yeah, that's what I would say.
Nice. People think that just appears. We just show
Yeah,
up, we talk, we leave, and all that other stuff just happens.
basically that's what I thought when I hit record. So
Gotcha. All right.
I learned very quickly that that's not how it works. So
It's a very honest answer, though. I love that. So thank you for sharing that. All right. All right. Listen, Greer, I love everything you've shared with us today. And, I have listened to your podcast. It's very interesting. And if anybody, has, interests or looking for more information in this area, they definitely want to check out your podcast. The Unfinished Idea with Greer Jones. So definitely gonna, plug that. We'll put that in the show notes. Make sure it's
cool.
there a little bit. But before we sign off, and as we kind of like wrap things up here a little bit, I always like to ask folks, especially folks who, I mean, you're 30 episodes in, so you've been doing this for a minute. You've learned some things. I'm sure, encountered some issues along the way.
Yeah.
What's one good piece of advice you can kind of leave behind for anybody who's just not quite where you are yet?
Um, the one thing I say, I've been asked, and my dog is now freaked out
Don't worry
that
about it. It's
he's
all
not
good.
in this room with me. So, uh, but if he comes in here, he'll try and sit on my lap, and then that's a whole another thing.
I got you.
But what I would say is, trying to think, what would I say? I what I would want to say is do the hard thing. Whatever that hard thing is for you. For me, that was hitting publish. If, for some people it might be hitting record. Whatever that hard thing is, do the hard thing. And know that it's not going to be perfect instantly, but you need to go through kind of that growth time. I remember the first like I don't know, probably 3 months, first probably 12, 15 episodes were probably rough for my listeners. Because I was nervous and I was trying to figure out how to do all of this. And some of them I was talking to kind of people who I was like, oh my gosh, they're kind of big names, in the neurodiverse world or have, one I remember talking to one person who is a New York best time seller author or yeah. I'm just like, oh my gosh, she's willing to talk to me. But I have needed to go through that to learn what my groove is and learn, kind of where I feel comfortable and how I can do it. And so, yeah, I would just want to say to people like, do the hard thing, whatever that hard thing is, do it. It's worth it. It'll be, yeah, it will get there. It will get good is what someone else told me once. It will get good. Just you got to get there.
Beautiful.
So.
It will get good. You just have to get there. That's
Yeah.
great. I mean, that's a great leave behind right there. I absolutely love it. The everybody's first episode is a first episode. It's not great. You know what I mean? Everybody.
Yeah.
So, and we all start someplace. So, I love that. Thank you for sharing that. All
Yeah.
right. As we wrap this up, let me just thank you for being on. Host of the Unfinished Idea, Greer Jones. Thank you for joining us today. You were absolutely lovely, and I love that your dog's in the background barking, and everything's just, I mean, very real and authentic, and you shared a lot. Thank you for that today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's been fun.
Thanks. I'm glad. Folks, this is the Podcaster Nation. It's the place that's about podcasters, it's for podcasters, and it's done by podcasters. This is the place that we all come together and we help each other out. This is where we come together and we're there for one another, where we subscribe to each other, where we host, guest on each other's shows, host each other, and build each other up. This is the place where the rising tide raises all ships. So keep sailing.